Good morning. Welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I am Brigid Burke, and today is the 13th of February, 2025. So we have another gray day here. I always start this with kind of the weather forecast, namely because I'm just waiting for people to have a chance to get on, so I don't want to get into anything too substantial until everybody, the people who want to join are joining, at least to start. And Joanne, good morning. Good to see you. Yeah, I think I haven't seen you in a couple of days, so it's good that you're on. What else? Trying to think. You've got the fire thing on there. Yeah, today is going to be a day. Well, this whole week and my whole life right now is very, very busy. I was talking about it a little bit yesterday on the Cattonia live stream, and which actually kind of ended up being an interesting exchange. Although I didn't necessarily get fully into all the topics I wanted to get into. And Alex, good morning. Good to see you. Yeah, I have, what you call it? Yeah, it's definitely, it's just a weird and weirdly busy kind of a month here. I have so much going on for the end of February, and I'm trying to figure things out. I'm trying to find some space actually to just not do anything really. But it is going to be a very busy next couple of weeks, just trying to get all kinds of things sorted. Including practical nonsense like taxes and stuff like that. And, going to appointments, taking care of things in between snowstorms. Like today's going to be warm and I've got appointments this afternoon. And then next week is going to get ridiculously cold again. So good to see you also. Yesterday was a whirlwind for me. Yeah, they're definitely... I don't know, for a time, I mean, astrologically, it's supposed to be fairly quiet. Today, I think the only main thing going on is we have the moon in Virgo now. So with moon in Virgo, this is definitely a time to focus on getting stuff done. So it's kind of not surprising that we're all kind of in that space. But at the same time, I also feel like it's like we're trying to move ahead, but Mars has not gone direct yet. Mars does go direct on February the 23rd. So that will be a time when I think a lot of stuff that feels like it's been stalled, or a lot of us who feel like our energy is not up, we might start to see a shift in that when that happens. Of course, one of the things, and Joanne says it's snowing here all day. Oh, okay, yeah, it's snowy up where you are. You're definitely a lot colder. Us, we're going to have rain all day, but then I thought I saw 17 inches of snow for next week. I was like, what? Like, it's like a 20% chance of snow, but 17 inches. I don't know. I don't think they know what they're talking about yet. But in any case, yeah, I feel like with what's going on, I was looking at the retrogrades. I was looking at both Venus and Mercury retrograde. Now, we've been in Venus pre-shadow since the 18th of January. And we will be in post-shadow on May the 26th. Venus actually goes retrograde on the 1st of March. Oh, hello. Welcome. So Venus will go retrograde on the, March 1st. And then Mercury goes retrograde on March the 15th. So that pre-shadow begins, because I was looking for when that pre-shadow was going to happen, and that's going to happen around it's going to be on the 1st of March. It's going to be the first day of pre-shadow. And Mercury retrograde ends around the 7th of April, but post-shadow goes to about the 26th of April. So, yeah, so there's quite a bit of these influences that are coming up. And I mention them because these are influences that can cause, lapses in communication. They're causing us to reevaluate the things that we do in life. If we're in business, Mercury controls that. Reevaluations regarding technology. Venus has to do also with, this is the time when they always say Venus retrograde is not the time to like get a new hairstyle or to do something very different. Do you know what sign Mercury is retrograding in? That is a very good question. I feel like, well, I know it's going to retrograde back to Pisces. So I don't know if it's currently in Aries. I think it might be. Venus is in Aries, and my understanding was that both of them were going to end up in Pisces. So yeah, there's going to be this retrograde into Pisces. Although I feel like at some point, there's going to be a connection with Aries and with the planet, with whatever is in Aries right now. Like everybody's going to start moving backwards to Pisces. So I'm feeling like it's more of an Aries Pisces kind of dynamic there in terms of where the retrograde is going to be happening. And yeah, and those are, of course, are two very, very different energies. You know, Piscean energy is softer, more about the emotions and the feelings. Aries can bring up a lot around, you know, where we want to take action, where we might feel frustrated, where we might have anger issues. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. So yeah, so there's all kinds of different things that it might have that inflection. But I was looking at the retrogrades, and I was also thinking about the numerology. So I hate people everywhere starting spring and winter. It's winter here. It's like, hey, time to ramp it up till almost June. Start spring and winter here is like, hey, oh, right, okay, so yeah, you're saying it's going to be a very, very long winter is what you're saying. Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that that spring does actually sort of ramp up by March when it's supposed to. So the thing I was thinking about today, Doe, was also, I was looking at the numerology of some things, and I was thinking about growth cycles. Now, first, of course, I was looking at my own. And the book that I tend to recommend to people for tarot and tarot reading which is Angeles Arian's Tarot Handbook. If you were in my class, I actually sent a bibliography to people in the class with the citation for that. Although I know I've posted it on Instagram before too. Angeles Arian is an anthropologist, and she wrote this tarot book using the Crowley Tarot and her archetypal interpretations, because I think she's a Pacifica graduate. I think she actually went to Pacifica, so she's very versed in Jungian theory. She's versed in, you know, mythologies, theories of mythologies, and so forth. And she's an anthropologist, so I think her book is very, very good to look at it from that perspective. But okay, so what ends up happening is, so looking at the numerology, 2024, the way that you figure out the numerology for a year it's very simple. All you do is add the numbers. So 2024 was 2024. So you can skip the 0. 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 plus 4 is 8, right? So the year is 8. 2025, the number for the year is 9. Now, if you're taking the tarot workshop this weekend, and right now I've only got Ellen signed up, so if it only ends up being her, I might move it. But if there's other people who are looking to join me on Saturday at 11 o'clock Eastern, yeah, check out the website. There is, or let me know that you want to do it, and you know we're gonna negotiate something a different way. That's fine. But growth cycles are something I want to get into because I think they're very interesting. Because growth cycles, as they connect to tarot, are quite interesting. Suda, good morning. Good to see you. I was just talking about the tarot bibliography that I put together, and actually it was your idea to do that. So I did that and sent that to everybody. I'm signing up. Oh, good, excellent. Okay, so we'll have Suda, we'll have Ellen, and then whoever else ends up signing up. Just mentioning it. I know a lot of times people will kind of wait till the last minute because it's like, well, am I going to be available? Because I understand, you know, you don't want to commit to it and then be like, oh crap, I have something going on Saturday. So, you know, it's fair enough if people are waiting. I don't have any issue with that. But it's just, I just want to make sure if people are signing up, sometimes people just forget about it too. So I figure a reminder is good. So I was looking at Angeles Arian's interpretations of what she calls growth cycles. And growth cycles have to do with, okay, when you interpret your own numerology, your own birth number is going to be the adding up all the numbers in your birth date. So if you were born, let's just say you were born on, I'm just going to make it up, April 1st. Okay, let's just say you were born on April 1st, the year 2000. I'm just making it up. Thank you for putting that together. Oh, you're totally welcome. We have basketball Saturday, maybe next month. No problem. Yeah, like I said, I didn't have a whole lot of leeway this month as to where I could schedule it. So that's kind of the only date that I really had. But that's fine. Whenever you can, we are going to try to fit it in monthly. I had to move the Dream Workshop to March 1st because that was the first, February is actually a short month. So kind of had to fit it in where I could fit it in. But the growth cycles. So your birth number is going to be the addition of your numbers. So I think I was just giving an example of April 1st, 2000, right? So, okay, so what's April? So it would be 04012000, right? That would be the numbers. And we can junk all the zeros. And so if you're going to have 4 and 1, that's 5. And then if you're born the year 2000, that's +2. So that's 7. Now, obviously, we usually have more than that. Sam, hello. Good morning, afternoon. Good to see you. We're just talking about growth cycles and numerology in tarot. So, okay, so in that particular case, the birth date that I just gave, April 1st, 2000, that's not my birth date, but just as an example. That adds up to 7. So therefore, your birth number would be 7. And the card connected with that is the Chariot. Okay, so the Chariot is so that would be that's Cancer energy that's connected with July, and of course everything with the Chariot has to do with travel, leadership, taking control, movement, like everything that's associated with that will have something to do with the direction that your life takes. Like that energy will have to do that. So she does talk about these kind of cycles, but the growth cycle is your actual birth date plus the current year. Now, the reason I'm pointing to 2024 also is because your growth cycle year is literally from birthday to birthday. So in the example that I just gave, that person's, in other words, it's 2025 now, and you might be saying, oh, but they're in their 2025 cycle. Not yet. After April 1st, they will be in whatever the numerological shift is, because it will run from April 1st, let's say 2024 to 2025. Okay. So just using that as an example. So 2024, like I said, adds up to the number 8. So in that case, that person's birth date was birth month and day added up to 5. So they would add 5 to 8, and that would give them 13. So that would put them in that is the death card in the tarot deck. So that would be a year of change and transformation. But remember, 13 also adds up to 4. You can break it down even farther. 1 plus 3 is 4. And so the Emperor card will have something to do with it as well. Like she would call that the Emperor constellation. I know we've talked about the constellations before. And again, in the class, that is something that we can get into a little bit more. So I was thinking about this, and I was just thinking about some of the stuff that's been going on in the collective. Now, when you're talking about a particular country, the way that you do a chart for a country is the birth date of the country. Sometimes it's arbitrary. Oftentimes, if it's a country that's gained its independence from another country, then that's usually considered to be the start date of that country. Although in some cases, you could pick a whole range of things. Like if I think of India, for example, when was India founded as a country? Well, who the heck knows? India's like been it's an ancient country, been around for ages. But some people might use the day of independence from British colonialism, for example, as a potential birth date. I haven't looked at those charts. I would advise looking at some of the Vedic astrologers to see where that would fit, in that example. Now, the United States birth date is generally considered to be the 4th of July, okay, because that's the American Independence Day, and it wasn't really a country before then, so that really kind of works as a birth date because it didn't exist as such before that time. So when you have this Declaration of Independence, so what we have, July 4th, 1776, right? That's the birth date of the United States. So, okay, so without getting into the birth number, if we want to look at where things are going in the cycle, okay, so July 4, 7 and 4 adds up to 11, okay? So, and 11 also breaks down to 2. So that puts the United States, just that part of their date, into 11 would be, depending, it could be strength or it could be justice, right? In Angela Sarian, she would put it as being strength, which is called the lust card in that deck. But then the 2 would also be more like high priestess energy. So if you add that to 2024, okay, so now you've got 7 and 4, you got 11 plus 8, that's 19. 19 is the sun in tarot. That's the sun, but it also breaks down to 10, which also breaks down to 1. So people who are in their sun year, it's also their Wheel of Fortune year, and it's also their magician year. Okay, so it breaks all of those things down. So what that says to me is that from July 4th, 2024 to July 4th, 2025 is a time of massive change, just from the numerological perspective in the country. Because the Wheel of Fortune indicates change that kind of happens to you. The magician has all kinds of things. The magician can be about manifesting and taking action, but it can also be about trickery. It can be about deception. The magician has a lot of different elements to it. There's certainly, when we talk about trickster energy, we are talking about something. This is too much math, certainly. It's okay, Joanne, I'll do the math for you. So when you're talking about a trickster year, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of, when we talk about this Uranus energy that's kind of affecting things, Uranus and Taurus, and the way that Uranus is going to shift. Interestingly, on July 4th, 2025, that's when Uranus, around the time Uranus moves into Gemini, there's an interesting kind of dynamic. So the sun illuminates things. Okay, it shows us something. It can be a very positive card. It can be a card of positive change, but we've also got this trickster element, and we've also got this kind of element of almost fate that's intervening here. Okay, so you've got all of these elements going on at the same time. Now, when you move into 2025, 2025 adds up to 9. That has to do with the Hermit. And so if you add the 9 to the 11 for July 4th, then that brings us to 20, and that's Judgment. Okay, and the Judgment card, Judgment generally has to do, if you look at it in the Rider-Waite deck, the Judgment card shows people rising out of the graves. It's like the Last Judgment, as it's described in the idea in Revelation and in folklore. I mean, that's what the Judgment card is based on. Paul, I had Google check my math. Yeah, you know what? And I understand that too, especially if you have a birth year, like if you're born anywhere in the 1900s and there's no 0 in the date, then you kind of have to sit down and kind of think about it, right? About what that is. But this year is the Hermit year, just a year. The United States will be moving into, on July 4th, the Judgment. Okay, so Judgment means we're moving it to the end of a cycle. Okay, but it is also a time of awakening and reevaluating where we've been. But it also can represent a rebirth. Okay, so if we keep that in mind, because I've been getting a lot of questions, and I've even had clients contacting me about things, connected to stuff going on in the country right now. And I'm like, you got to remember, we are in a time where light is being shined in areas that that Pluto and Aquarius does this too, right? It's the idea that light is being shined on what's been in shadow, what we have not seen. And it's a very positive omen, though. It does give us a positive path forward, but there's a lot of unpredictability here. What corresponds with 2? And the birth year and growth number is the same. Is that significant? Yeah, that's interesting, because it's almost like the equivalent of a solar return, right? 20 could also be 2. Yes. And that, what I was going to go next, was the High Priestess. That's card number 2. So that is the feminine energy that we are talking about. Okay, yeah. And that was the other thing that I found interesting. Not only is there an awakening, but there's the feminine mystery that's brought in. We're out of the tricksterishness of that, but now we are entering the mystery. And this is where the mystery becomes more prominent. Okay, and where that feminine energy becomes more prominent. Remember, we've been talking now for probably since September, or maybe even August, about the way in which we are moving into this very heavily feminine period. And it doesn't seem that way right now. It actually seems like we're more masculine than ever. We're more patriarchal than ever right now. But I had gotten a message from Azrael yesterday morning, which he referred to them as affabialo. He says they're empty voices. They don't pay any attention. Be careful about what you're paying attention to right now, because the energy is tricky. We're not in Mercury retrograde, but there's that feeling of, we are in Venus retrograde pre-shadow. So there's definitely this sense of looking again at what it is that we value. Okay, so that is all happening. So that, I just find that very interesting, in addition to the astrology of things, that we're moving into these years that may have more to do with this rebirth, reawakening, evaluating and making decisions that are going to lead to a new beginning. And with that priestess energy, though, that's that push of feminine energy that comes in. So I just find that very interesting. Obviously, all of it remains to be seen. We will see where we end up. So just thought I would share some of that. And like I said, if we're in class, we're going to talk a little bit more about that on a personal level for people, what that means in the Saturday class, in addition to, doing some practices and stuff. But the other thing I wanted to mention was something I was talking about in the live stream yesterday. I did a live stream. I just wrote an essay for Metapsychosis Journal about the back rooms. Now, this was an essay I kind of had started, and I had done a Patreon-only podcast on this topic. So we were talking about ideas of the uncanny. We were talking about ideas of the liminal, of being on the threshold. And one of the things I talked about towards the end of the live stream, I love it. Yes, I know, I do too. It's awesome. One of the things I was looking at the end of talking about the end of the live stream was the fact that you wonder if part of the appeal of the back rooms, and the back rooms is this aesthetic where you're in these spaces, that these vast empty spaces or ruined spaces that go on forever. Sometimes they have a nostalgic vibe, but sometimes they just have an uncomfortable vibe. And it's almost like, how do you get out of those kinds of spaces? I'm not going to go into the whole backroom story right now. You could go, that live stream is on the Cattonia podcast channel if you want to watch that. But, and of course I will share the article when it comes out too, in Metapsychosis. But it's, okay, so I was thinking about the fact that one of the appeal of liminal spaces, or this kind of focusing on the, because we often are attracted or repelled by things that speak to us unconsciously, okay, that speak to our soul. And so a fascination with liminal spaces it can be a fascination with the past. It can be like, for example, if a liminal space is like an empty shopping mall or an empty amusement park, like you might think of what went there before and the fact that nothing is there now. Okay, so there's this sense of loss that can be attributed to it. There could be a sense of nostalgia. There's like a search for familiarity, but it feels uncanny. It doesn't feel right. It feels off. The original Backrooms photo was of these rooms that were yellow. Apparently it was some kind of a store, Hobby Town or something, and it was being renovated, and that's where the original picture came from. If you look up Backrooms as one word origin photo on Google, you will find it. And there's like this yellow patterned wallpaper and this beige carpet and like the fluorescent lights that are really, really bright. And you know what it's like to be in those spaces. If you've ever been like a conference attendee at a hotel, for some reason, a lot of conference spaces have this kind of pukey kind of color scheme. It's like a puke mauve color, or it's gray, or it's that yellow. And all of it, for some reason, I don't know why they choose those colors, because maybe they're meant to be neutral, but a lot of times they're very unsettling. It's the same thing you would see like in a corporate cubicle in a way. It is an unsettling vibe to it. And especially with the high fluorescent lights and everything. And so the idea is that this is almost like a mental space. And it made me think about the fact that in living in a society as we do, that doesn't share a worldview. Okay, if we think about Europe during the Middle Ages and so forth, everybody was at least expected to share the same worldview, right? And mind you, I'm not advocating going back to that. We don't all want to be the same or all be forced to think the same way, because we all are here doing different things and we're on different paths. But when you're in an environment where everybody's on a different path, well, yes, with the color schemes, yeah, exactly. It's like, ugh, you know, it's depressing. So okay, so if we're in a space with when you're in these kinds of spaces that feel uncanny to us, okay, then it's like uncanniness has a lot of definitions. The German word is Heimlich. Okay, normally we associate the word Heimlich with Heimlich maneuver, because I think it's named after a person with that name. Heimlich just means, as somebody pointed out, Heim means home. So this has to do with home or hominess or feeling at home or domestic. Freud had pointed out that uncanny also in German, or Heimlich in German, also means that which we conceal, which people are not supposed to see. So weirdly, Heimlich is very similar in some ways to unheimlich, which is supposed to be the opposite, which is something that feels foreign or feels off or doesn't feel familiar or doesn't make us feel at home. You know, it's that kind of an energy. And that is a feeling that one often associates. I mean, we were talking about it. We got kind of derailed in the whole thing about AI and technology, but which is, again, there was that discussion there. So if you're interested in that discussion, there was some interesting things that were brought up. I'm not saying it was a bad discussion or anything like that, but it kind of got away from this other aspect that I was talking about. But when you're in a liminal space, the thing I was talking about at the end were guides. Okay. And if you are in a space, a liminal space, this is an anthropological term, which is usually a state that somebody is in when they are undergoing an initiation. Okay. They call the phase of the neophyte. And in a lot of tribal situations, this was like a rite of passage ritual. And so if you had so for example, you hear a lot about Mircea Eliade and a lot of the other ones write about tribal rituals, where you will have boys who are like, you know, men come in and seize them from their mothers, and they get put through these weird like scarification rituals and stuff in certain tribes. Well, maybe they're not weird to them, but but the idea is that it's a rite of passage ritual. The boy is no longer a child and is going to become a man in the society. Okay, so this is just an example. Now, we don't do rituals like this anymore. Whether there are tribes, there may be some tribes out there coming home, but mysterious in a way. Or mysterious in a way, or coming home and it doesn't feel like home anymore. You know, like there's something about it that's not right. And we long to grab onto something familiar, you know, to something to relate to. That's why when people talk about concepts that we don't relate to, that's why a lot of times you need metaphor and things to say, okay, it's kind of like this. So people can go, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. I understand that. You know, that's the way that people can connect to things. So but you can't always do that, you know, and especially some of the stuff we talk about here. It's like, how do you conceive of that? The mind really wants something that it can hang on to. So when we have this kind of feeling, though, when you're in a society where you don't have a straight guide path, now people might be raised, say, in a particular religion. Okay, a lot of us were raised in a particular religious system. Maybe some people still accede to that system. Maybe some people have now practiced different religions, or maybe they don't practice any at all. As we have life experience, our connection to those traditions and so forth will change. You know, they'll either be retained in some way or they'll be discarded. I mean, this is just kind of how things work. But the thing is, we live in a society that is secular. So basically everybody is free to choose their own path. And the thing about freedom is, now freedom, we all want freedom, but at the same time, that also means you're free to pick a direction, and it means you're responsible for picking your own direction. Okay. And a lot of times people don't necessarily want that responsibility. You know, which door do I go into? Tell me something about what's behind those doors so I know which one to choose. Right. So this is where people seek guides. In a tribal initiation, those would all be monitored by elders of the tribe who know what happens and know where the young boy, man is supposed to end up. And so you have these periods of time that are in between, where using that same example, where the boy is no longer a boy, but not yet a man. Okay. So you're in this space that is in between that. You're neither on this side nor you're on this side. Okay, you're kind of both and neither at the same time, and we're not comfortable with that as a society. We like to. This is why so many people. It's really weird. One of the things that seem to be targeted right now, and I don't want to get into this, but people who are trans in particular, people who or people who experience gender fluidity or have don't want to identify with either gender. There's this attitude of like, no, you have to be in one gender or another. It reminded me a bit of, in Japan, they had the wakashu. And this was when Japan was still isolated from the Western world. What they would do is, adolescent boys, they might wear their hair long and dress as girls. They might even have relationships with men. But it wasn't that because they were, they identified as gay or they identified as homosexual. This was just a phase where they could go with women or they could go with men. Like they were kind of in between. And they were considered to be kind of a third gender called the wakashu. But they said once that Japan was westernized, once the first ship came from the United States and they started signing treaties and sending people abroad and doing all these things, then all of a sudden the wakashu disappeared. Men in Japan were expected to cut their hair to a certain length, and they were forbidden to wear it long. Women had to wear their hair in certain styles. Like there had to be this very strict gender, no more third genders. And I feel like that's interesting because that seems to happen in patriarchal settings, for one thing, because they're dualistic, because they say it has to be one way or the other, right? So the thing is, we have a society that's demanding that things be one way or the other, right? But all of us, I think, in terms of how we're living, regardless of, we don't necessarily, we have cisgender identity, right? We don't have to say like, oh, you don't have to necessarily be trans or anything like that. You could just still, be man, woman, whatever, and still, you could still feel like you're in a liminal space. There's other ways that we feel like we're in a liminal space where we don't quite fit in to the either or model. We're both and those aspects of ourselves, the things that confuse people, they're like, well, what are you? Like they look at you, they make a judgment about you, and there's an expectation of what you are and who you are. And those expectations and judgments can be wrong because you can't You know, the old don't judge a book by its cover, right? You don't know what people are like. And people may make assumptions, and we've talked about this in the past, you know, about the way people make assumptions about the way you look or the way you wear hair or the way you know, dress or whatever. People will make certain assumptions. But what becomes uncanny is when we're in a space where, and again, when you have societal shakeups, there's the sense of, okay, I can't see what's coming, and what's in the past. Also, too, like when people go through depressions and so forth, what gave them joy before no longer gives them joy. You're at this point where you're like, you know, that thing that you always used to go to that made you feel better doesn't make you feel better anymore. But that's because you're in a state of transformation. And when you're in a long time standing state of transformation, how do you get out of it? You need a guide. Now, weirdly, that's kind of like what my business is. It's transition life coaching. Not that I have the answers for everybody. And so that brings me to the whole idea of a guide. What does it mean to have a guide? You have guides that may be people who help you, and those are difficult to come by. And you also have guides who are, you may have spirit guides. If you are somebody who is spiritually inclined, has spiritual experiences, and recognizing that not everybody does. And we don't live in a society that necessarily fosters that. Probably a lot of people who are the regulars on the live stream here are people who have had spiritual experiences, okay? And so therefore, or they've had some kind of experience. Typically, if you're going to have what's thought of as a religious or spiritual experience, it is something, it's either a sense of dissatisfaction with life where you are, like I was just saying, like you get to a point where you're like, this feels empty, or this is all there is, or whatever. Or you're at a state where you've had a very profound experience and like you don't know what it means. And it could be both. It could be both of those things at the same time. But these things are actually guide signs that you are shifting, that you are changing. And a lot of times we want what's familiar. We want what's comfortable, because what's not comfortable can feel uncanny. It can feel like, ooh, that's weird. I don't want to be in that space and do that. So this is where the emptiness becomes something that we're afraid of. You know, what's in those back rooms? What monsters lay there, right? And so I think that when we think about a guide, there's a couple of things you have to remember. Now, first of all, it's very, very difficult to find a guide. If you are within a traditional religious community, you will have guides. Whether those guides always know what's best for you there's a question mark there, because they are going to guide you along the path of whatever the rules and dogmas are of that particular system a lot of the time. And if you happen to have somebody who's like, say, a priest or a minister or somebody like that who is very authoritarian in the way that they behave, and this is actually a characteristic of people who become usually police officers and ministers, is that they can have that authoritarian kind of streak. And what I mean by that is that there's a tendency to want to control. Well, no, you have to be this way and you have to do it this way. And if you stray from this path, you're doing it bad or you're doing it wrong, right? Like there's authoritarian is controlling. It's saying, no, it has to be done this way. And so you run the risk of that when you're dealing with traditional religion. You're going to have to stay in this box. Well, there's a lot of people who don't want to stay in the box. So they might join esoteric or occult religions, okay, which you can. But again, that's a playing field. If you're looking for a guide or a mentor in that space, they're not that easy to find, because a lot of times guides and mentors in that space have agendas, ulterior motives. They're tricky. They're magicians, right? They're tricky. And I can speak, I've been in this community. I was in this community for a very, very long time. I guess to a certain degree, I still am, in the sense that, you know, I don't really practice so much in that area anymore, because, you know, just because of the way my life has shifted, but I'm definitely still, you know, connected with people in those communities. And yeah, when you go on an esoteric path, if you go on a path like Tantra, if you go on a path like, you know, you're joining any kind of esoteric order or something, you don't, depending on where you are, you don't always know whether or not the person to whom you're trusting your initiation, or the person to whom you're trusting your tutelage or your teaching, or who's teaching you, is somebody you can trust. Is this person trying to groom you for something else, or for their purposes or their agenda? And when you're in a space of not knowing, it's very difficult. It's like when you find somebody who you consider to be a good guide, then it's like you stick with them, right? Because this is why, like finding gurus, for example. Sometimes there's people who use the title of guru and, you know, or claim some kind of a lineage when maybe they're not what they claim to be. So it's a very difficult landscape to navigate in terms of people, which is certainly at least one reason why I tell people you want to develop your own intuition and instinct, because oftentimes whatever's on the surface, that's what's going to tell you whether that person's trustworthy or not. That's going to tell you whether or not this is somebody. But also be aware that sometimes you're gravitating towards somebody because they seem to be a projection point for what you're working on. I will tell you this about any guide: no guide should be telling you how to live your life. No guide, if they are legit, no guide is going to tell you how to live your life. They're going to tell you, okay, they'll listen to you. And a guide can be all kinds of things. They don't even have to be spiritual. It could be a therapist, for example. You could have somebody who just listens to you and says, oh, did you think about this? Did you think about that? Oh, well, when this comes up, this is kind of what this symbolizes. You know, you look at it, it should be a person who's guiding you, but not saying this is what you have to do. I know sometimes there's a temptation of people to be like, I want to come in and help you and save you, but we're not here to save people. Okay. When you consciously act as a guide, to me, the ethical responsibility there is like, no, you need to show people. And not everybody has the right. You have to feel somebody who resonates with you. You know, different people are coming in with different levels of experience. Like if I see somebody who's like 20 years old who's coming in as a guide, I'm like, look, no offense, you may be a very bright person, and you may be way ahead of your years, but you're probably not. I don't know, like, that I would choose that person as guide, because it's like I don't think you've lived long enough in this lifetime to really be able to absorb everything that's going on with you right now. So anyway, there's that. There's who guides you, and again, it's going to be different things for different people, and different people are going to be drawn to different people into different systems. Certain methods and techniques are going to work for you, and others are not. And it's not going to be the same for everybody. So nobody should tell you, I have the answer and you need to work with me because I am the one who's going to save you. If somebody says that to you, run in the other direction. Nobody saves you. Ultimately, we save ourselves in the sense of, and what we're saving ourselves from, I don't know. I mean, we're just living our lives, and we have to undergo our own transformations. Other people can't do it for us. I have a funny story which I'll DM you about self-proclaimed guides. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of them. So, okay, so that's one thing. Now, when we're talking about a spirit guide, and I am doing our reading as we go here, because I know we're getting close to 8:15 here. When you're talking about spirit guides, again, there's the factor. If you come from organized religion, okay, if you come from, I'm just going to use Catholicism as an example because that's where I came out of, right? What they will always tell you is if you have a spirit guide or you are guided in a direction that is contrary to church teaching. This is why a lot of these mystics kind of like use all of this language, because their experience is definitely going to be beyond church teaching, but they have to make it sound like it fits into the dogma. Otherwise, well, in the Middle Ages, they would have gotten burned at the stake. But, you know, you have this whole thing of, you know, there's a right way, you know, we know what the exact path is to God and you have to follow it. And anything else is, quote unquote, the devil, right? And if you've grown up Catholic, that is a hard thing to overcome for a lot of people. Even people who enter pagan religions, they still start doing paganism kind of like Catholicism. You know, they kind of, it's like because they don't know any other way to do it. It's not because they're stupid or anything like that. They just don't know another way to do it. The idea of religion as being something other than what they were taught. It's like, well, then what is it? You know, like you have to learn that. You know, it's something different. The way that one relates to what we might think of as the more immanent deities, or when you're dealing with multiple gods, it's not the same kind of a dynamic. But whoever your guide is, you know, you need to have an instinct about that. Your guide comes to work with you when you're ready. Okay, and if you're not ready, then they might be in the background, or they might kind of, I don't know, try to kind of get their way in. And you could have multiple guides too. Some people have a multiplicity of guides. You know, it could be ancestors, could be, you know, could be, again, spirits or angels connected to your belief system. It could be deities connected to your belief system. Whatever your guides are, when you build a connection with that guide, then you get to know them intimately, and they have certain characteristics, which is why I was talking a little bit about angels the other day, because I said, you know, these are the characteristics of angels, and this is how you know you're working with angels. But when we get in touch with our guides, the question is, how do you know you're dealing with a legitimate guide? And that is something, again, that is something that in large part has to be instinctual. Just because a guide tells you something that's not in your experience doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad guide or they're evil or something like that. If you're working with that guide, you know, and even if working with that guide makes you angry or makes you, some people say like, oh, that person started working with it and now they're angry about this and that. Well, maybe they're trying to provoke you to work through something. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. But if you find that it is having an overall destructive effect on your life, then yeah, you're probably, you know, not working with the right guide. Your gut instinct tells you a lot too. And this is hard because we're taught pretty much from a young age to ignore that because it's not quote unquote rational. So yeah, there's a lot. I've always feel like in working with guides and things, if people are completely new to it, have no idea, don't have any experience, and again, it may just be that, or your guide could be there and not making themselves evident, or it could just be maybe it's not quite the right time. You know, maybe you're going to have another experience and then you're going to connect. I mean, but it's knowing instinctually when you're working with somebody. And there's also, as we had talked about in the intuitive development classes, you can call a guide to you too. You can go and there's meditations you can do to look for your guide. So anyway, I did want to talk a little bit about that because, you know, there needs to be, there's the question of how do we validate things? Ultimately, in this kind of an environment, the only person who can guide you through your initiation ultimately is yourself. You have to know what direction you're going in. And if you don't know, you have to let your intuition guide you to the people who are right for you and to the guides who are right for you. It's not going to be the same thing for every person. And just because there's a set of circumstances around a guide that's right for you doesn't mean that that's going to be the same thing for another person. So anyway, I do want to get to our reading because we are almost towards the end. Our key card here is friendliness. Two of Cups here. And we've had this before. So yeah, we're talking about guides. We're talking about connection, right? But we're also talking about friendly support. This is kind of the centerpiece here. Friendliness is about how we connect with others. Now, when we look at the Two of Cups, the Two of Cups we often think of in regular tarot as kind of romantic card, like, oh, you're going to get together and there's going to be a romantic relationship and so forth. And, you know, maybe for some people that's what it is. Some people through their spouse or their partner or their boyfriend, girlfriend, you know, whomever, they may have this kind of this kind of energy. You know, that this may be somebody who can be a guide for you or can be somebody who you can bounce things off of or connect with. The inner feeling of which we are unaware is the intensity card. Okay, this is Knight of Wands energy, and yeah, so there's an intensity of feeling. To me, that has a lot to do with Mars energy. And remember, Mars is still retrograde in Cancer. So then we have this. Thank you. You answered a question I was pondering recently. Oh, okay, cool. So intensity, yeah, I think there's an intensity of feeling. That's that magician energy. We want to move forward. We want to do something, you know, we want something to happen. And this is the energy that can motivate us, but it also can make us very, very impatient too, and very frustrated when we can't move ahead with something, right? Now, here's the external feeling, morality, okay? Here's our Queen of Clouds, and this is a perfect example of what I talk about this kind of external morality here, because if you look at her, she's got this cage, like this almost jail cell, like this grate over where her heart is. It's like the heart is just completely caged in. And she looks almost, you know, her face is very pruny and wrinkled, and she's wearing like the cuffs and everything, like she's got this Puritan kind of ethic. But the face is very sour. And it's that, we are not amused and we do not approve kind of a thing. Our hearts are closed and we're not interested. You know, that's that kind of energy. And it is called the morality card. And that is the card of judgment. But it is the card of judgments that are made, these kind of dogmatic judgments, the ones that close the heart down instead of opening it. And we are definitely being pushed into a space of heart opening, not heart closing. But we have to be able to find our way through, you know, this space to where we authentically feel, you know, Heimlich, where we feel at home, right? This card comes up a lot, and I think I saw it in Patricia Weston's reading today too. Maturity, which is the Ace of Pentacles. Okay, that's our advice. the advice is it's encouraging you to move towards the new. When you're stuck in an in-between space, the worst thing to do is to try to turn around and go back. You want to kind of keep moving forward, because you'll be moving into a new space where you can establish security, that home, so to speak, in a new place. And this may mean, again, Venus retrograde. What are our values? What are we reconsidering? You know, what is the place of money? What is our definition of abundance? All of this is part of what we need to look at. And ultimately, this is interesting. We have the Four of Pentacles, which in this deck is called the Miser. Okay, and you see again, it's this kind of ugly looking woman who is like holding on to all her jewels, and it's like she's built into a wall. And the idea is that a lot of times we want to hang on to what our own definition is of security. I'm not going to let go of the thing that I have. I'm not going to share anything. There's a lot here about, you've got, okay, on the one side, you've got this idea of friendliness and heart opening and new beginnings and new security. And on the other side of the reading, you've got this idea of putting up walls and closing the heart off. Okay, so we've got both of these things. And internally, this kind of space that we're in is being fueled by this intensity that's going on, this desire for change, this desire to move ahead, to take action, to do the thing that we need to do. And as I mentioned, Mars goes direct February 23rd. So it'll be interesting to see how the energy shifts with that. But yeah, we're in a space where it's telling us don't stay behind the wall and in the box. The way out is through the heart, and the way out is through connecting with others. So interesting reading today. I'm going to pull a gateway card to finish, and then we'll finish up for today and come back tomorrow, which is actually, interestingly, I guess it's Valentine's Day tomorrow. I mean, I haven't done anything about Valentine's Day in ages, but but it's a thing. And so let's see what we've got. Whoops. Okay, our card is called Launching Your Journey. Okay, and I'll read to you what it means, and that will be my parting words to you for today. Launching your journey. The universe wants you to know, where have you always wanted to go? What have you always wanted to do or be? This is the time to make it happen. Launch yourself forward and explore the world around you. However, before any journey, inner or outer, take time to prepare for the adventure ahead. Know where you are and where you want to go. Right. Let's find the map. Where are we on the map right now? That's a lot of times the reason people go for tarot readings or astrology readings, you know? And Joanne says, sometimes the toxic feels safe because it's familiar. It's what we know. Exactly. It's the devil you know, literally. It's, you know, yes, you know, I hate this and I hate these 10 things about it, but if I go into the new space, maybe there'll be new things that I hate, right? It's that kind of a thing. You're right. Okay, launch yourself forward and explore the world around you. However, before any journey, inner or outer, take time to prepare. Know where you are and where you want to go. How will you get there? What steps are necessary in order to take the leap? Have a clear vision, but also be prepared for the unexpected. Allow the journey to bring as much joy as the destination. So yeah, now we're back to living in the present, right? And you know, just focusing on where we are as a jumping off point for what we need to trust in. So that's my reading for today, and that's my little spiel on guides and numbers and other things. We'll see what comes up for tomorrow, but I will join you guys at the same time again. So I want to thank you all very much for joining me, and of course, if anybody new, glad you could join me. Don't know if you've stuck around for the whole thing or not, but in any case, hope this was helpful to everyone. And like I said, I'll see some of you on Saturday. So again, just a reminder that that's happening. And yeah, and I will see you guys tomorrow morning. So have a great Thursday.